The American music mogul Sean Diddy Combs has been cleared of the most serious charges involving racketeering at his criminal trial in New York. That verdict came through earlier today. He was convicted of the 2 lesser charges, though, out of the 5, which could still mean time behind bars. And in breaking news this hour, Combs was denied bail despite the offer of a $1 million bond. Joining us live now is former US federal prosecutor Jim Trusty. Jim, it's good to have you with us this morning. So, a bit to discuss. There are a few breaking developments, and we're watching a live stream of outside the courthouse at the moment where we're waiting for some commentary from both sides of the legal argument. But to you now, let's just run it back to the verdict today. Not a full acquittal for Mr. Combs, but given how he reacted in the courtroom, perhaps just as good.
Yeah, it's a huge win. I mean, what's left on the table, what he is convicted of, they are felonies. They do carry potential for 10 years in prison, although he's not going to get the max. But they are small. They are essentially prostitution cases that cross state lines. I mean, that is as small a charge as you can imagine in the context of an indictment that included sexual trafficking and a RICO conspiracy charge. So he has won the war in large part. He's not going to get 10 years. He's not going to get 20 years. He faced a much more dramatically serious sentence if he was convicted of the sexual trafficking and the RICO charge than the what are called Mann Acts, the charges that are left on the table.
All right, so let's just break up that answer. Why not the max, in your view, and what is likely?
Well, typically what happens from this stage on is there's a pre-sentence investigation by the U.S. Probation Office. They're going to actually write up a lengthy report, maybe 60, 70, 80 pages, all about this guy's life, his finances, his lack of criminal record in this case. It's going to talk about his social history, his upbringing. It's also going to have a calculation for the sentencing guidelines. We have advisory guidelines that judges consider very heavily in meting out their sentences. And when the guidelines are calculated in this case, unlike a RICO conspiracy or unlike a sexual trafficking case, they're going to be dramatically less. I mean, my guess is you're talking about guidelines in the range of 3, 4, 5 years. And then, of course, it's not binding. So the attorneys from each side can argue why the guidelines are either not enough or are too much. I think by the time he gets to sentencing, you're going to have the defense attorneys arguing very hard for time served. He's been locked up since September. That means basically anything from about 18 months or less is going to result in his release at the time of the sentencing or very soon after. If he gets into 2, 3, 4, 5 years, he'll have some more time to do in federal prison. And the judge has heard a lot of ugly facts, to be sure, but the counts of conviction and those sentencing guidelines are going to weigh heavily at the time of sentencing.
Jim, can you just elaborate on that point you made earlier about the charge of prostitution crossing state lines? What's the difference between that and, say, racketeering?
Yeah, kind of light years. I mean, the racketeering is alleging that Sean Combs and P. Diddy, whatever his different names, that he was part of a criminal enterprise. And what was kind of inventive, although not unheard of, was that they were charging a single person as a criminal enterprise. This is a law that goes back to 1970. It was created to go after the leaders of organized crime. And essentially what you're doing with RICO is you're telling the story of multiple predicate acts, a whole bunch of different crimes committed on behalf of this criminal enterprise, this ongoing thing. And it's just counterintuitive for a jury to hear there's only one person in that thing, that there's a one person and his businesses forming the criminal enterprise. So the story of a RICO conspiracy is much more like you expect when you talk about either gang prosecutions or mafia prosecutions. The story of a simple count of the Mann Act, which is this old and kind of controversial statute dealing with prostitution crossing state lines, is much narrower. It's going to shrink the universe of what he's being punished for and what he even faces in terms of forfeiture. So
if we get back to being cleared of those more serious charges, I mean, in layman's terms, if you can explain, was the point made to great success that, you know, the victims here crossed these lines, crossed these state lines willingly, that they weren't coerced, that they went there on their own volition, if you like?
Yeah, I mean, that's the heart of the fight here was essentially, you know, how much did these victims agree to the conduct they were involved in? I think everybody that paid attention to the trial kind of felt diminished by the end of the trial. There was so much filth and so much kind of moral decay. But at the end of the day, the charges for prostitution don't require coercion or duress or anything like that, nothing forcible. The RICO conspiracy, the sexual trafficking, then you start talking about specific intent. You start talking about crimes where people are clearly victimized. And I just think there's a cultural divide. It was kind of hard for jurors to accept that all of this kind of crazy party freak off lifestyle was necessarily criminal when people would keep coming back to it.
It was kinky, not criminal.
Your words.
I heard someone else say that, and it just sort of stuck with me. It was kinky, not criminal. That about explains part of it anyway. Just a final point. If you're saying, and we're talking about the lesser charges that he was convicted of today, why wouldn't he have been given bail then? I mean, is it still serious enough for him to not get bail and do time?
Yeah, that to me is kind of the biggest mystery of the day. And I'll tell you why, and specifically. Lots of times federal cases, no matter what you're convicted of, you take a hit. You know, it's kind of like Al Capone got convicted of tax offenses when they really wanted to get him for murder, and he still did time. But here, the judge specifically said to him at the time of the verdict, he turned to Sean Combs and said, "I don't think you want to go back to Metropolitan Detention Center, do you?" And Sean Combs said, "I sure don't." You know, he kind of nodded along like, "I don't want to go back." I thought at that point that was a tell. This judge was absolutely going to let him out. Instead, it's kind of sadistic, right? You like tell the guy, "I know you don't want to go back there. I'll see you in a few hours," and then he sends him right back.
Yeah, right. Hey, Jim, good to have your expertise on this morning. Really appreciate that. Thank you so much.